And I think Creed actually had Kane, and they couldn't do this. They couldn't do it at this point in the career. They're too busy or something. So all of a sudden, Kane became available, and we were like, "Oh, we'll do Kane. We'll do Kane." And so me and James originally, we just thought we got to try to do our version of like the Vader March kind of thing, like a
Sure.
big like entrance. He's just a big, that's he is what he is. He's Kane. And when we wrote out that music, there was definitely this idea of like trying to make it a big heavy riff. And I remember working on that riff with James over the phone. Like we were talking, and then but the one thing that they had in the agreement was like we had to include the Jim Johnston, like that
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
that
yeah.
had to be like, it was like, you have to have this in here.
You are listening to the Ropes and Riffs podcast with your host, John Kiernan.
You can go check it out everywhere. Finger 11, Last Night on Earth. And first off, we're going to talk all about that song. We're also going to talk about Slow Chemical, Kane's entrance theme, as we do talk about entrance themes on this show. My guest today, Rick Jackett. Rick Jackett, thank you so much for making the time to chat today.
Nah, no problem. Rick Jackett sounds like a wrestling name, though.
See, you know what happened? I knew you're coming on the show, and then I'm just like, oh, Jeff Jarrett. So it's just
Yeah. Well, Jackett's a pretty, I don't know where it came from, but it's a different guy. I've never met any other guy named with the last name Jackett. That's for sure.
And like we said before jumping on here, for those who are listening, you're missing the epic experience of this beard here. Like, you know about the beard, but look at the beard.
I know. I look at it, it keeps going and going and going.
See, I had a beard that never got as long as yours. My hair got as long as yours, but like the beard, it was just, I loved it. But eventually I cut it once and I'm like, man, I see everyone who has like these just amazing full heads of hair. And I'm just like, dang, I should have kept growing mine. But
Yeah,
see, you're gonna for the both of us.
it's you know what? It's one of those things. Like, I mean, for me personally, being in the band, you get a lot of opportunity to like have fun with the way you look and like just take it to the extremes because we don't have a 9 to 5. No one's gonna fire us. You know what I mean? So I don't have to wear a hairnet around it or nothing. But like to me, when I was growing it and I had a shorter beard, I met Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top when it was just leaving my face. And his beard is like epic and perfect. And like it was honestly one of those moments of seeing him in real life with my eyes. And it clicked in my head. And I was like, oh, it's humanly possible. Like it just sort of clued. So I just said, screw it. I'm going to grow it and see how it goes. And it just never stopped growing. It just keeps going. And it's like, but you know what? The honest, I forget I have it. I just do. I forget all the time. So
I love the fact though that you're just like, I met ZZ Top and I figured anything with this part of my face is possible.
sort of, yeah. I mean, it's a true beard inspiration story. Like I think I was already thinking about growing a longer beard, but when it gets off your face, it gets to that awkward length and it feels really weird and you're not sure what to do. And when you see a guy who's grown it for decades and it's down to his belly button, you're like, all right, if I can go there, it'll work out. So that was pretty much it.
I love that. And ZZ Top, just as much as they're known for music, are known for their beards. And it's
It's
awesome.
true.
So you guys just released Last Night on Earth. And, one thing that I've always loved about you guys is the versatility that you guys bring, right? For those who are familiar with your work over the years, Paralyzer is an amazing song. Everyone knows your discography. And now you have this record that's just come out. People know Slow Chemical from obviously the wrestling side of this, but you hear Finger 11 and you could hear an acoustic track. You can hear something that's a lot more enveloping. You can hear a hard rock metal track. And so on Last Night on Earth, you ended up doing all that again. And
Yeah.
when I was sent the record and I started listening to it, the first track I heard was Last Night on Earth. And I'm just like, I watched the video and I didn't know what to expect. And that's probably one of the best things that you can say about a musician when you open up a record. You're like, I don't know what I'm going to get. You hear this song, you see all the visuals, and you see and you hear just such a wide breadth of style. So walk me through a little bit as to what the vision was for the record.
Yeah, I mean, that's a massive compliment. Thank you. And it's not by accident. Like we've since the beginning of the band have always enjoyed all styles of music. We've never just been like a heavy band and we couldn't just be a soft band because it's just inherently not in us. We just want to pick up our guitars and put on distortion. But we had always admired bands like, when we were growing up that could do that. Like, like there was like the classics like Zeppelin and Floyd, who could be like really intense and heavy, and then also like beautiful and melodic. But then even in the '90s, a lot of bands, like let's say Pearl Jam was one of them, or like there were bands or Soundgarden, like who could be heavy, but they could also write these beautiful songs, and that was just ingrained in our mind as we were becoming a band. That's sort of the the goal isn't to sort of repeat yourself or stay in one place for long. It's to constantly sort of change. And we didn't expect it to be like we sort of went from record to record with no real vision. Just sort of it's a Finger Eleven's a very natural process, and it really is just the music that comes from us. We don't have a goal, we don't have an agenda, except for make the best Finger 11 music we can make. We always say there's sort of an inside joke in the band, like we never know what our next song is going to sound like. We don't know. Like it's not until we start putting fingers to strings and words start coming out that we know what it's going to be. And that's one of the fun things about I like being about our band, about being in the band. But over the years, that multi-genre sort of thing was not necessarily a strength for Finger Eleven. There was a many years where there were specific genres that were popular, and if you weren't in that mold, it didn't people it sort of I don't know if it confused people or they just were into those things at the time. So there was a lot of times where we were doing the heavy and the soft and record labels and they didn't know where to place us,
Right.
which we were fine with because we didn't know where to place ourselves either. We just were like, listen, this is our journey. We're just gonna go down it. But now at this point in our career, and also I would say at this point in music, it's because of streaming and because of all that, it's never been more genreless. And I think in a lot of ways, a lot of audiences, they're open to that more than they ever were before. They're not being told by gatekeepers and what they should be listened to and what demographic listens to what. They've given all the option from all the music ever made to something made just today, and they can choose. And I think people, it's not as if it's a good song and it connects, that's what they like about it. And that's what we've always liked about our own band. Like we're song oriented before we're genre oriented, I would say. So it's a massive compliment that it comes through on the new record. And that so all that being said, I would say on this album, as we were making it, it was becoming pretty clear that there were um different years of the band sort of shining through, and all of a sudden we'd have one song that was like that's like '90s Finger Eleven, and then we have another one that's like that's like mid 2000s. And so it sort of became this full spectrum album and we embraced that at a certain point. And also the addition of Steve, who's like our newest member, but not new. He's been in the band for 12 years, but
Sure.
he brought this sort of like sort of perspective of the band from being outside and a fan of the band to reminding us about things that we did musically that we maybe had forgotten about or even just dismissed over the years. And we sort of decided to sort of reference ourselves for the first time in our career. And it sort of created this good representation of Finger Eleven, I would say.
But it's also interesting you bring that up too, because kind of going back to one thing that you had said, I think a lot of people in this streaming era, it's like, if you like heavy, here's more heavy. And by the way, here's more heavy. And if you like heavy and you like this one band, let's just go and siphon you off. And I think that in a way, as much as it's like, oh, a lot of these services are trying to tell you that that's what you need to listen to, a lot more people are doing what you said, right? They're like, hey, I don't just listen to this. Yeah, I listen to heavy stuff, but there's this whole gamut of music. And especially when you have a band like Finger 11 who comes around and you guys say, you know what? We're collaborative, we're working with each other. I'm bringing this riff in, and then the rest of the band is bringing their influences in. I think that really speaks to not just being as, even though we are in a kind of singles era as it comes to 2025 in music, when you have a fan base that knows, okay, cool, Finger 11 is going to be really trying a bunch of things, you get to build that audience that's like, hey, it's not, I'm going to listen just to heavy music or just to acoustic music or just to light music. I'm going to
Right.
listen to who's going to give me an artistic experience. And I think that, that really, to like you said, that shines through. It's a different experience that I think a lot of the streaming services would really like you to funnel into.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's also just the way we've listened to music. We've always been fans of bands with albums. We've always loved the journey of the album. And, that was something that even right down to when we were doing the track listing for the song, I think there was 5 or 6 different track listings and they were quite different. Like some were heavy off the top, light off the back, or some were light off the top. And and it took us a while to find the perfect combination where the thing constantly felt like a ride.
So when you go from a song like The Mountain and then you go to Last Night on Earth, it's all natural. It's not something where you're like, okay, we wrote a heavy song, now we have to write an acoustic song. Now we wrote a heavy song, we have to write an acoustic song. Now for you though, Last Night on Earth is to me one of the most powerful songs on the record. And it's not just because it's the song that I had heard as, one of the singles, but for me, it's one of the ones that I think came like really, when I'm talking about, oh, okay, cool, we're going to have you on the show. Cool. Slow Chemical, listen to Parallel, listen to all these other things. And then you're hit with that song as like, oh, that's the one. What made
Yeah,
you?
I think we felt that way about that song from the very first demo of that song was just a little phone note that is rare for our band because most of our ideas start in the studio or on a computer, and there's tracks to be shared and all this stuff. And this was just one of these old school phone messages of a guitar progression and a vocal, and it stuck, and it instantly really connected. And it has been around for a while. Like, it was one of the first songs we wrote after the last album. And that was 10 years ago. And it went through a lot of different versions. There was a lot of demos of it. And it wasn't until the very end where we sort of, I don't know, like we had this really awkward day where I came in and I was like, guys, like we all love this song. The label loved the song. Everybody loved the song. But we were like, I said to the guys, like, without having the idea, all I had was a D chord. And I was like, it needs a chorus, like a bigger part. And that was really frustrating because it had already been around for 9 years. And it was sort of like, hey, we're not done yet. And I think everybody thought it was done. But then when we sort of cracked it open again and we started strumming and we came up with a melody and a chord progression, and Scott nailed the words right out of the ball, like just nailed the words, and it was done. Like, so it was like that song took like 9 years and like 2 weeks to make, and the last 2 weeks is when we finished the song. And it's just, this album was like that. We had the luxury of time. We had no label telling us to do what we had to do. We had no one waiting and watching and pointing, like asking us for albums. Even all through the 10 years, there was talks about singles because it is a single world. And we were like, you know what? We just put that off long enough until we said, like, let's not do singles. Let's just do an album. And I think that was a good decision because it's missing. There's just not a lot of bands around that are a full-fledged 5-member band that are like, not, there are, but not from our era and not from our generation. You know
Right.
what I mean? And so I think that was sort of our responsibility, if nothing else, was just to make another Finger 11 record and make it as good as we could make it.
And I want to ask you about that too, because you had the distance between 2015 to 2025 before the last record to now, and you had mentioned something just a second ago that you're not with a label and you have this ability to kind of be doing it the way that you guys see in your own mind, in your own vision, right? And for me, seeing the visuals for that video was just, again, me being a father now and seeing these kids riding in the street, and then there's just this giant black hole. It's insane. But for you guys, how does it feel to have that freedom to really be able to do what you want? Because I know that there's a lot of positive side to it. Like you get to write the music you want, you get to do that. But I'm sure that there's also the other side of like, it really is all on you guys in the band and the management.
Yeah, I think it was great for the band, to be honest. I think we had been signed from such a young age, and we had put all our records out through labels, and we had great relationships with a lot of those labels, but a lot of the relationships we had made were gone. So we were sort of on our own, and that was a real opportunity, especially at this point in our career, because it was almost like going back and making our first record again. It's like one of those opportunities in life, when people say like, "Oh, if I could just go back and do it again with the knowledge I have now,"
Yeah.
that's sort of what we did. And it took us longer than we thought. And that would probably be the downside of not having a label, is that there isn't someone telling you, "Hey, this is taking too long." We didn't have anybody telling us like, "Hurry up." But other than that, the creative process was like really organic, really just trust based, and really just within the five brains of the band. And that's usually for Finger 11 when we are at our strongest.
And that's one thing I also want our audience to understand too is like there is a difference between being an independent artist, no matter the size and the breadth of what you've done before and your fan base, and being signed to a label too. You have all these people who are working with you, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, you can have all these contacts and all these people, but when you're going on your own, you're really on your own. You're finding your own management. You're finding your own cadence at which you're going to release records. There's so much stuff that goes on behind the scenes that when people just go, oh, they're Finger 11. Of course they're doing this. You're like, no, there's a lot of things that go on that
Right.
you guys are having to do on top of the creative side too. So being
Yeah,
able to
I
put out
think
the record
so.
that you had, yeah.
And I think for in our experience, that's sort of like the it's not like they're both different routes. You know, I wouldn't say one's easier, one's harder, but there's sort of this misconception that like every swing has to be a home run and there's no succeeding unless you're number one on the charts. And that's just not the truth. There's lots of place between first and last, and there's lots of space there to succeed if you're not always trying to be the biggest band in the world, you know? And I think that was something that we sort of accepted and got comfortable with, just the idea of like, listen, we're comfortable going our own path, even if it's not the typical path or the path that everybody else is telling us we should take or the path that other bands are taking. We're just happy being Finger 11 and we don't want to put too much stress on the machine and we don't want it to break up. So we do what makes us happy. And we're very fortunate.
So I know you said you're not putting much stress on the machine, but I'm going to stress you out right now because I'm going to ask you what your favorite song on the record is, and that's almost like choosing your favorite child.
Yeah, no, I could honestly say it's changed quite a few times because my
It'll
favorite
change
thing in
tomorrow too.
being in one of my favorite moments of being in a band is the moment when the record's mastered and it hasn't been released because no one knows about it yet and it's finished. So we stopped thinking about it, we stopped worrying about it, we stopped listening to it critically, and we start just enjoying the finished product. And but no one else has an opinion about it yet, and it's still ours, you know. So that's my favorite. So I listened to it nonstop in the last like 4 or 5 months, and my favorite always changes. But I would say this for the heavy songs right now, my current favorite is "Perfect Effigy." That song to me is just a style of Finger 11 and a taste of Finger 11 that we haven't put out for a while. It's got the end riff of that song is one of my favorite riffs we've ever come up with. And for the slower, more mellow side, I would say Wall Dogs is my favorite slower song because I just love the atmosphere of that song.
I love that. And again, for anyone who hasn't checked out the record yet, go check it out because again, it's everywhere right now. There's so much awesome music on it. For me, it was definitely between Last Night on Earth and Blue Sky Mystery because I'm always I don't know what it is about me, but I'm always like a second song kind of guy. And
Yeah, yeah.
to a record, it's just like, the first one is the one that hooks you. The second one is the one that keeps you. And if that second song is good, then you know the band really just gave it their all for the rest of the record. And I'm just like, so good.
That's awesome. That's a great theory. Yeah, yeah. And I think that song does that well. I think it keeps the momentum going and it keeps you excited if you're already in after adrenaline. So that's awesome.
Now we're going to go in a little bit of a different direction here. As you know, my background is in wrestling entrance themes music. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Slow Chemical, Kane's theme from years and years ago. I don't even have to go into a description of who Kane is and who Finger 11 is for you, the audience. But this is a song that when Kane debuted originally, breaking open the cage, he had a different one that was written by Jim Johnston, obviously. And then years go down the line, he takes off the mask and Slow Chemical comes out. And for me, being a wrestling fan for so many years, that will always go down as one of the best entrance themes of all time. And for me, it's always about what brings out the character, all that kind of stuff. But to be able to speak to one of the founding fathers of that Kane theme, I'd love for you to crack open a little bit as to the process on how that theme came to be, a little bit of the collaboration with WWE and Jim Johnston. And, we'll talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah. Thanks. No, you know what? That song still this day is probably one of our most viral in our catalog. Like every day we're being tagged in posts with someone reposting that song with Kane or his entrance, and we get a lot of love. We get a lot of people saying they it's one of their favorite entrance songs too, which is we all grew up, in the launch of the massive WWF, and we all grew up with wrestling. So to be a part of wrestling legacy, history or whatever, it's very, very cool. And to be honest, I'll give you the story. So there was a record coming out, or a CD, I guess, coming out called Forcible Entry.
For all us old kids, CD,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you put in the record player.
and and I think the offer to be part of it came to us, but I think when we got asked, there wasn't any wrestlers that we were wanting to do it for, right? It was like they'd all been sort of cherry picked, and something happened, and I think Creed actually had Kane, and they couldn't do this. They couldn't do it at this point in the career. They're too busy or something. So all of a sudden, Kane became, you know, available, and we were like, "Oh, we'll do Kane. We'll do Kane." And so me and James originally, we just thought we got to try to do our version of like the Vader March kind of thing, like a big, like, entrance. Like he's just a big, he is what he is. He's Kane. And so when we wrote out that music, there was definitely this idea of like trying to make it a big heavy riff. And I remember working on that riff with James over the phone. Like we were talking, and then but the one thing that they had in the agreement was like we had to include the Jim Johnston like that thing
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
had to be like, it was like, you have to have this in here. So pretty much that part is them. And then everything else we wrote as a Finger 11 song kind of thing. And
One thing
when
I
we
do wanna
finished it,
I wanna
Scott,
cut in I wanna cut in
yeah,
real quick because you said something, and I didn't think of it until now, because a lot of people that I bring on the show and a lot of composers who have written or bands that have come in and worked with Jim and other people, they're often like, "Hey, we have this wrestler that we want you to write for," right? And in an interesting way, you're kind of saying that whether it's like your label or WWE said, "Cool, Finger 11, who do you wanna write for?" And you were given, like, a choice of different people to write for. Is
that's
that
right. Yeah.
wow,
Because
okay.
I think that was the whole premise of that CD was modern bands doing their takes on existing
Right, yeah.
intros. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of hooks, musical hooks they wanted to include. So yeah, there was a list, and we got to pick. Yeah, we would. I don't know even know if we would have done it if we didn't get Kane, but we got him, and it was just one of those things. And as soon as we came up with the song, I remember thinking at the time, because Scott had, it was about, it was not supposed to be about Kane, but we knew we were writing for Kane, and Scott sort of delivered this love song, and I remember at the time being like, that's not what I would have probably thought to write lyrically, but it was such a good, intense thing that it worked perfectly in the song. So the truth is, though, when we gave them that song, there was a bit of a, I don't honestly remember with who, but there was a bit of a back and forth. And I think it had to do with mastering and publishing rights. And there was this sort of like, we did a disagreement, let's call it. And to the point where if you go look, it's not on forcible entry because they left it off because of the disagreement was still going on when the CD was being released. So there was a moment where we thought, okay, I guess they're not going to use it. We'll just take the Finger 11 part and go make it a Finger 11 song. And it sort of got lost in limbo. And then I'll never forget one day we were at our pub that we like to drink at back in the day, and we were just playing pool and the TV had wrestling on, and I heard the little organ start on the TV, and we were all like, "No way, they're gonna use it!" And then all of a sudden, we turned around, and he came out, and it was the first time ever, and they probably used it. I don't know how many times over about 10 years, and then it got released on others. It did end up getting released on some CDs and soundtracks, but there was a moment where it almost didn't happen, but it did, and I'm glad it did because it was such an opportunity for Finger 11 to be part of something that we're not normally part of, and it opened a door to a lot of music fans and that got into Finger 11 just from that song alone. So
And that's the reason why I'd brought up about like, oh, you were choosing somebody, because I remember Forcible Entry and I could probably, 14-year-old me could probably Rolodex the entire album. And I was just like, a lot of people think that Slow Chemical was on there and it wasn't. And it showed up on TV, when he took the mask off and everything. And I was just like, or when he adjusted the mask, right? And I'm just like, man, why wasn't that on there? Was it a different time? And I was like, no, it was, I never remembered it being on there, but I was just like, it wouldn't it sounded like such an interesting dynamic, the kind of song that you guys wrote, the lyrics like you said, and being like, okay, this is for Kane, like it, because a lot of the songs on Forcible Entry were about the wrestler, but you could also venture to say that they were just like, okay, here's an artist, here's their creative take on kind of like the melodic contour of it, and then they
right,
just picked a song that worked for them. So I was like, that would fit on Forcible Entry. But when it was like, oh, years down the line, you guys wrote it for Forcible Entry. It just happened to be used years later.
yeah, pretty much, yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, it's pretty well. Like I like just because of industry bullshit, really, it just didn't get used for that. But you know what? All's all that, things happen for a reason. The universe is a weird place, and it's got certain things have to take certain paths, and that's just the path it took. So I am happy. The fact, I mean, I was giddy, like over the moon giddy when like he used it, and then he had a crazy run. and he was the champion for like ever, and he was like a superstar, and it was like it got taken everywhere, and it got a global attention, and it was very good for the band. So
The time when you heard it on at the time you guys were in the pub and you heard it, were all the rights kind of squared up by then, but it just hadn't been like, hey, it hadn't been used yet? Or at that point when you heard it, was it like, because in a way, I could see it being both ways, where you're in the pub and you're just like, no,
right.
this is awesome. But at the same time, you're like, no,
Well, let's put it this way: all the like for them for it to be have been used, they would have had to say yes to everything that we didn't have, that we had a problem with. Do you know what I mean? And they did. So it was all good. Like, you know what I mean? It was just principle. A lot of it, we're weird like that. Like when we if we're collective about something, you can't budge us. It's just the way it is. So
that's how a band should be, though. The
I
collective,
think so.
it's the big brain. And even though you have a few people in the band, it's like you got to move as one unit, otherwise it's not good for anybody, so I
No,
love.
I think so. That's very finger eleven. Like we put it above us. The band is above us all as individuals. None of us are bigger than the band, and we have a lot of respect for that. So we treat the band with a lot of respect. That therefore it trickles down into the individual. So
I love that. Have you ever gotten to have a conversation with Kane, Glenn Jacobs, about the song and see what his feedback has been on it? I mean, his feedback is probably it's great. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been using it for like a decade now.
right, right. Well, you know what? We met Kane. We had one opportunity, which was very strange for our band because again, we're not really like that kind of band who like knows how to yell, get up. We're not just that. We're just chill. So we did this thing, and I can't remember if it was WrestleMania 20, I think maybe because it was in Toronto at the Skydome. Whatever one was at Toronto at Skydome, I think it was 20 though. And we went for like the WrestleFest promo, and we were sort of backstage, and they're like, okay, you're gonna go into the rink, and Chief is in there, and Fink was guiding us, like what's his name, Howard Finkel.
Yep, Howard Finkel, yeah.
Yeah, so he was telling us what we're doing, and we're like, okay, cool, and we're like, and Kane sort of stand there, and he's not really talking, he's in character, and it's like a couple minutes before we go on. So right before we're supposed to go on, Finkel just disappears, and we're like, where's he going? I thought he was leading us onto the stage, and he just leaves, and we're like, what are we doing? And Kane's just like not talking. So we don't know what to do. And we sort of wander our way with him onto the stage. And it's so loud and it's so hard to hear. And the crowd's cheering like just we found out in hindsight that they were cheering choke slam coach, right? Or sorry, not chief coach. And they're yelling that. And to us, it's just blah, 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 blah. And we're just thinking like, oh, they hating us? Like, what's going on here? Because we don't know. And so Scott, our singer, just sort of mumbles some stuff about the song coming out and how, but it was the middle of July, and he was like talking about how we made it at Christmas time, and he said like Merry Christmas to these people, and they just did. But the best was like any other wrestler match, that wrestler would have taken the reins and taken the mic and hyped up the audience and done his job. But we were stuck with the one wrestler who doesn't speak. You know what I mean? So it was up to us to do this wrestling promo, and we're not wrestlers, so it was very awkward, but it was fun. It was a cool thing to experience. So.
And I love too how like you have Kane, who started with obviously like the big orchestral entrance. You have Slow Chemical, and you have something that he used after that when he put the mask back on and all that. But I think everybody who thinks of Kane thinks of Slow Chemical first and foremost, right? There are some of us who are young and remember like that first cage breaking thing, but when you think of Kane, you think of Slow Chemical. Like it's an instant connection. So it's like there's a lot of bands that over time and a lot of musicians who write music for wrestlers, and it's like those two are so intertwined. And I think Finger 11 and Kane's legacy will just continue to be that for the rest of time.
I think so too. It was instant, and it was simultaneous, the success of both things, and I think that's cool. I mean that's awesome, man. Like I said, like when we see the comments like one of the best wrestling themes, like like I said, like I still come from the era of Real American. So if
Yeah.
you're putting Slow Chemical anywhere near Real American as a theme, as a wrestling theme, and it's good, and it's like that's amazing. That's incredible to us. Like we just those moments when they enter the ring sometimes is my favorite moment of the whole wrestling special. So that's to be part of that is always, it's been great. I would just wish, like, it's sort of sad that it's over. I wish you would come back and use it again.
Love that. And, at that time, you were probably collaborating with Jim Johnston also. Like, he was probably the music guy at that time, which, Jim
There
Johnston.
wasn't much collaboration with him. There was
Okay.
just direction. This has to be in the song, and then we just did it all our own.
That's
Really,
interesting.
that was it.
Because
Yeah.
again, I've spoken with, other bands too, where they're like, hey, we have like a recording of like the Miz's theme that Jim Johnson is rapping, which eventually we got to find that. But it's like, like a rough draft, and you guys just kind of put it into your style. So this was literally like you said, like the forcible entry thing. Hey, here's Kane, do it. That's awesome.
Yeah, very much, very much.
So now we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to do a little bit of Music City Rumble, where I'm going to have you book one men's singles match, one women's singles match, and one tag team match, and you get to choose your favorite musicians to go in the squared circle and beat each other up for a little bit, and then you get to choose the winner. So
All
let's
right.
do our men's match, our singles one-on-one men's match.
All right. So our singles one-on-one men's match, I would have Maynard James Keenan and Morgan Whalen.
Oh my God.
And knowing that Maynard is fully trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Morgan Whalen probably isn't. I think that would be a fun match to watch. And I'm guessing I would pick Maynard as my victor for that one.
I was going to say you chose him because of all the things that he's done, all the bands and just all the artistry that he has, but you chose him because he had a leg up in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
That's right. I chose him because he's a badass off stage. But yeah, no, obviously he's he's like, he's a living legend. He's, as far as the music that we grew up in, he's incredible. And I'm actually a huge fan of Perfect Circle as well. So yeah, Maynard, but I'm impressed with his off stage discipline in that world.
Love that. And how about our one-on-one women's match?
This one, I thought, okay, here, are you ready for this one? This one's going to be called a paparazzi match.
All right.
And it's going to have paparazzis around the ring. And we're going to have Bjork and Britney Spears. And I don't know if you remember when Bjork lost it on that paparazzi when she was pushing her baby at the airport, but she got wild. And then we know Britney Spears is like, she can get crazy when the camera's on. So that's who I would go after each other. But I still think after seeing that like mama wolf, mama bear energy that Bjork had, I think I would pick Bjork for the winners.
I'm in on that too. Britney Spears has that fling around an umbrella energy, but there's nothing like a primal mama.
That's right. And she's way more focused and disciplined. And yeah, I think it'd be fun to watch, but.
And now we got
for
the tag team.
The tag team. Okay, this one I put some thought into as well. So I'm gonna go with, check this out, Daft Oats versus Hall Punk. Okay, so it's the robot and John Oates versus the other robot, Daryl Hall. But during the match, there's a betrayal, and they actually flip sides and both reunite into their original teams, and then they battle. And I'm gonna say Daft Punk's probably going to win because they're going to have like robot powers and stuff, Perfect. That'd be my that's my tag team wrestling.
I love that. And I love how there's a double turn in there too. Like both sets you reunite. That's awesome.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like it'd be betrayal. Oh my God. Yeah, it'd be amazing. I like the names too, Daft Oats and Hall Punk.
That's so cool. I just want to create a tag team called those, Daft Oats and Hall Punk. That's great.
Right? It'd be good.
And then one more question I ask everybody when they come on the show. If you had to choose 3 songs that represent you as the person that you are, what 3 songs are those?
So first song I would pick is a song called If 6 Was 9 by Jimi Hendrix. It's just, yep, that song musically, everything lyrically, that song I just relate to. It makes me feel at home. I pick a song called Earth Rocker by Clutch, which is just a great song about loving being in a band, being on stage, rocking. And then I'd probably pick Hey Hey My My by Neil Young.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, the rock spirit it's alive in me, and I very much believe in it. So yeah, those would be the songs I would pick.
I love that. Neil Young's been on Music City Rumble a couple times. Neil Young has been in people's songs that represent him a few times, and I love that because Neil Young's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I just saw him. He was amazing. I mean, he's getting older, but he was incredible. He sounded perfect. Like just his guitar playing and his voice. I mean, just timeless, ageless. It's incredible.
Yeah. He's another guy that's just like, he loves music to the ends of the earth, and he's just like, I'm gonna perform till I die. What's
Yeah.
retiring?
Yeah,
So
and he's also one of those guys who, like, he's had that career and that success of, like, the multi-million platinum things, but he's also just as happy with putting a record out that no one even listens to. So it's like, that's what I really respect about him. You can tell from a long time, he's not doing it just to become rich and famous. He's doing it because it just can't help but come out of him.
Well, Rick Jackett, thank you so much for joining us today. Once again, new album is out, Last Night on Earth. Everyone go pick it up everywhere. If you're listening, obviously, Slow Chemical, you can always pick that up. But Last Night on Earth is just an awesome record. Out now. Check it out everywhere you check out. My friend, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.